Hi there, everyone. Brian Lee with Fools and Sages. This episode is about liminal spaces. Liminal spaces are in-between spaces. It comes from the Latin word limen, or limen, Limen, which means threshold. And it's an in-between space. And it turns out that in nature, these in-between spaces are particularly filled with life. There's a mystery in those in-between places. So we're going to explore those in-between places, those liminal places. And we're going to talk about a little bird. We're going to talk about the infundibulum, which is, well, I'll explain that later in the episode. Our episodes are always typically dialogue, sometimes without a guest. Sometimes it's just our hosts here. And it's always unscripted. We never know where it's going to go. So without further ado, the dance of the plover and the Chronosynclastic Infundibulum. Enjoy.
Hey, Brian.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right.
Well, I actually did kind of have an idea for a topic today.
Yeah,
And
lay it on me.
it's kind of curious because, we were going to record yesterday. And so I was thinking about this yesterday, and then we had some internet issues. And so we're recording the next day. And so I've had a chance to think about this because the original idea came to me in a dream. It's not that the idea came entirely cooked in a dream, but the thread came in a dream.
A symbol of the idea, for
A
sure.
symbol of the idea, right. And so then with some cooking of it and some following of the threads, I've sort of come up with, I think I even know the title, The Dream of the Plover and the Chronosynclastic Infundibulum.
Great.
Right?
You'll have
Almost wrote itself. The Dream of the Plover and the Chronosynclastic Infundibulum. And so yeah, there it is. I mean, I hardly need to explain it. It pretty much speaks for itself.
Well, that was a good episode. Thank you.
Yeah, for
good
sure.
to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. So how might this have happened, you might ask? So I'm having this dream, and at some point in the dream, someone tells me or presents to me the word plover, Plover, plover. And they're saying, like, check this word out. I didn't bring a lot back to my waking world apart from the thought, oh, you should check out the word plover. And honestly, when I thought about it, I had nothing. I mean, and probably most of our listeners, unless you have a particular or an aficionado of shorebirds, you might not have any affiliation with the word plover at all.
I just know it's a shorebird.
Shorebird, exactly.
Yeah. And I have some idea, I think, what it looks like. But now I'm assuming you went on an etymological exploration.
And a symbological. There's
It reminds me of the dream I had about mangrove. I might have mentioned it before. But are we talking about the border between the material and the emotional and the plover bridging that?
The plover, well, I said, what's the symbolic meaning of the plover? It says the plover centers on perseverance, vigilance, and adaptability. In Japanese culture, the plovers, called chidori, symbolize the perseverance, perseverance and family safety, as they're known to brave harsh weather during migration. They can also represent patience, mindfulness, and a connection to nature, acting as a spiritual guide to help appreciate the present moment. And then it goes on to explain these different qualities. This is all from my friend Al. And but the thing that was significant there was this idea of inhabiting that fringe area between the ocean and the land. And of course, what the plovers do, I presume, I haven't pursued, a lot of plover watching, but they're running back and forth as the tide goes in and out, getting all the goodies. And as I recall, not particularly wanting to get their feet wet if they didn't have to, but maybe I'm misremembering that. I just remember the going back and forth and going back and forth, literally riding that wave line between the solid, stable, not completely unchanging, but certainly more stable than the ocean. Between that and this ever chaotic, and yet it's the ocean that's throwing up the food, that's keeping this thing alive, right? And yet it has to do this dance with it because it's changing every second. And that's why it gets connected with mindfulness, because he's got to pay attention. And his whole deal is about paying attention, right? And so in a lot of ways, this sort of represents the role of the artist. Because an artist has to do this dance with chaos. And a lot of what we're trying to do is we're trying to pull down this ever-changing thing that you get a glimpse of, but it never freezes for you so that you can translate it. You have to do the freezing of it by catching it with your mind, that image, that whatever it is that you're trying to evoke or capture or communicate.
Can you say more about what you mean by chaos? Because I assume that an artist has forms a vision, or a vision comes to an artist or whatever, and then the artist kind of transmuting that image into reality is the genius of artistry. Mm-hmm. But I hadn't necessarily thought that any part of that experience is necessarily chaos. But I'm kind of inferring that you're saying the image originally comes out of like the primordial soup, which is chaotic. Is that what you're?
It isn't just that. It's not always a rule, but a great place to see it is if you look at an artist's studio. Now, this actually, what you see behind me here, is not in a state of working studio. It's way tamer. Okay. My wood shop looks a lot more like what a working studio looks like, which is to say it's in a type of a state of chaos. And the productive flurry is a type of chaos. And that's one of the things I've said, is that you don't just create something, but you protect the thing you've created from destruction all the way through the creative process. Like if you're a jeweler, you're using torches and rapidly spinning wheels. It could whip this thing across the room or melt it, or, every creative process has these controlled demolition aspects to it.
The avoidance thereof.
Right. Like we see the pietà, but we don't see all the destructive force that powdered all the stone that wasn't the pietà, but happened to be stuck all up around it until the pietà was released from it. So all the orderedness that you see in the Pietà was balanced by a disorderedness or a chaos that is represented by all the chips and powder that the artist also rendered in the creation of the, or all the soiled rags and all the tools that were destroyed and the chipped hammers, and not to mention the smashed fingers and the wounds and all the psychological turmoil that an artist brings to it. Sometimes it's a personal chaos. Sometimes it's in spite of the rest of their lives. And if we get glimpses of an artist's studio, we'll see that. It leaps to mind for me was glimpses of Picasso's studio or Basquiat. There's a documentary about him where I think you get to see him in his studio. But a lot of artists, what do you typically see? Paint everywhere if they're visual artists. Or if they're sculptors, there's tools all around, and there's all sorts of things that are, the process is so destructive that when I was trained as a goldsmith, I was told, and this was like a traditional thing, when you're working repair on someone's jewelry, you never let them see it in the process of being repaired, because they'll my grandmother, what you just took a blowtorch to the thing. I mean, and there's a truth to that, because it's not until the end that it comes out and it's pretty again. And a lot of that has to do with this battle with chaos, and a lot of the heroic aspects of great artists is that they've won this battle with the creative forces, right? And so yeah, there's a whole dance there between chaos and order.
I wonder if we can follow that thread just a little further, and then we can come back to the Plover. When we talked about the history of Western thought, you talked about the pre-Socratic worldview being one that defined the universe in terms of chaos and order, and I wonder, what I'm thinking about is how that seems, along with a number of other dichotomies, to be a useful way of viewing the world. Do you think that's still like fundamental to how we understand the universe? What's really going on? Is this relationship between chaos and order, or the way that we derive meaning has to do with the relationship between chaos and order? And I wonder if there's more to be said about that.
Well, now you're getting into the Chronosynclastic Infundibulum.
I was planning to.
Okay. You worked your way towards it. This idea of the dance between order and chaos, right, just came to me symbolically from where? The dream world. And my conscious me that woke up, it only woke up with check out this word, these 6 letters. And when I looked at that, I assumed that the bird was named after some other word, which it's the etymology with a plover has to do with pluvia, which is rain. So there's not any obvious that thread didn't really pan out to the interpretive faculty of pulling meaning, right? Ordering, seeing the order in this thing that just came out of, what's more turbulent and chaotic than a dream, right? So, and that has to do with the Chronosynclastic Infundibulum. that part almost, says itself, right? Now,
so chrono is time.
Chrono is time.
And what's the next piece? Synclastic.
Synclastic.
So syn is same, right? And clastic.
Yeah.
I don't have a good etymology for clastic. And
Yeah.
infundibulum's got to be like both infinite and bone.
Yeah. No, good start. Good start. You lost focus at the end there. So something that is synclastic is basically, the easiest way to describe it is something that's bowl shaped. And a bowl shape is an example of a synclastic shape because all the curves, they all curve into the same place.
Okay, so
So
like a
synclastic
parabola.
roughly means curves that all curve into the same place,
Yeah,
like that.
like how a parabolic reflector, no matter where the sun hits on it, it'll bounce to the focal point.
Right. Now, whether bouncing counts or whether it has to be a curve to be synclastic, that's a detail that's, I don't know. But to
That's
make
for
something
another dream.
chronosynclastic, and then it's almost a little redundant to say, to call it an infundibulum, because what an infundibulum is just the Latin word for a funnel.
Oh.
And what a funnel does, of course, is it takes everything from one place and it sucks it all down into one, right?
I mean, Infinity Bone was not that far off.
It's a bank shot, but it'll work in there, So now what's interesting, one of the fun things about the Chronosynclastic Infundibulum is that it was originated in the year of my birth. So it's not an ancient idea. This is not Plato. There's not a dialogue about the Chronosynclastic Infundibulum, or if there was, it was lost. And so it was actually, this term was created by Kurt Vonnegut.
Of course.
In the 1959 novel, The Sirens of Titan.
Oh, that's a great one. I don't remember that. It's probably been 20 years since I read that, but love Vonnegut. Okay.
Yeah. And so it turns out that in that setting, the Chronosynclastic Infundibulum is a kind of a problem. But the idea of what is a Chronosynclastic Infundibulum is an interesting one because it sort of echoes ideas of the eschaton, which is another thing that it's not in common parlance. Or for those of us who are conversant in Teilhard de Chardin, he wrote a book about the omega point, right? Or this Hindu idea that all of creation is one day of Brahma, is it? And that when that day ends, all of the multifarious aspects of creation all just suck back into God. And that's one day of Brahma. And so that God just plays this game, spreading itself out into infinitesimal, unself-conscious, unself-aware particles, and then plays the slow, time-consuming, infinite spatial game of letting it all come back into. It would be the idea of the opposite of the Big Bang. Right, the big sucking in of everything back into, and Lao Tse, he talks about the Tao at one point saying it's far-reaching and far-reaching returning. So again, it has that idea of a diastole and a systole, but like the big diastole systole. And so but the idea is that this is where, and what you relating to what you were saying, this is where everything collapses into one awareness, where all contradictory truths are seen at once. where all time, I should get Al to give me his definition of the chronosynclastic infundibulum.
A chronosynclastic infundibulum is a fictional concept from The Sirens of Titan, where different truths and realities coexist. It's a funnel-shaped space, and entering one lets you see all possible timelines.
So you enter that funnel-shaped space, you can see all possible timelines. I don't know if we could hear her reading that.
Slightly, but it's good that you repeated that last part.
Yeah, a fictional phenomenon from Kurt Vonnegut's novel, The Sirens of Titan, described as a place in space where, quote, all the different kinds of truths fit together. A funnel-shaped space where different truths, perceptions of times, and realities can coexist simultaneously, and entering one allows a person to perceive all possible timelines. All truths are reconciled. Time becomes nonlinear. A space-time portal, but instead of transporting, it scatters them across multiple times and locations simultaneously. So yeah, there you go. But the idea is that there is this higher reality, and when people talk about, and some of the folks that we've spoken with have talked about teleology, and teleology philosophically is related to the Greek word telos, which means an end. The omega point idea, because omega is the last letter of the Greek alphabet. Jesus in the Gospels, I am the Alpha and the Omega. I'm the beginning and the end, right? Well, that plugs into the Upanishads and all these other things. It starts with it's all God and no differentiating, and then it expands out into the universe, and then we don't see God, because then God hides himself with himself, as the Quran said, and then it all comes back together as God again. And that's this idea that all of us, when we talk about we're all walking each other home, well, we're all kind of coming back together as the idea in this universal expanded consciousness, in this chronosynclastic infundibulum, where all truths make sense, because everything's seen from what Spinoza called subspecie eternitatis, from an eternal viewpoint. And it's interesting because they reference that time shift where all timelines exist simultaneously. Well, that's this idea of eternity, where all things make a cosmic sense that is beyond the contingent world of conditions that cause things to arise, and then those conditions dissipate and those things dissipate. So yeah, there's a lot there.
Well, it's funny because the episode, just before we started recording, I said I have an idea for an episode, but it's not time sensitive, and I've been thinking about it for a couple of weeks, and it's relevant, of course, and it's trying to answer when we had Michael Wolff on, he kind of made maybe a shorthand proof for why the universe is a dream or an illusion. And the proof was essentially, if we can have synchronicity in dreams, then how is life not a dream? Like if synchronicity exists, then this must be illusion, because a material world could not contain synchronicity.
Chuang-Tzu questioned the same topic about the butterfly.
Well,
Who am I really?
I told Michael I don't think that cuts it for me, but I can't make an argument in this moment. When you got a like philosophy professor who spends all of his time thinking about this stuff, you don't want to just throw out the first thing that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. Take a weekend.
Yeah. But what I've been thinking about relative to that is the coexistence of dream and material world, or the Buddhist saying that life is like an illusion, but there's still getting hit with a stick. and there's still like a material reality that we experience. And
or
for
is there?
me, what's
a lot
that?
of people, or is there a lot of folks claiming it's a simulation right about now?
Sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think it is. I think it's like a simulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the synchronicity and symbols and this information about the plover, or the clue to follow the plover, or in my case the mangrove, which is kind of a similar symbol, which is interesting, come from um, layers of consciousness that aren't don't obviate material reality. They only imply that material reality has some form to it, has some. I don't understand quantum physics, but it's just us here. So I'll say quantum potential implies this also, that reality doesn't have to exist from one moment to the next, but it tends to, and that it is reality that is tending to exist, and it's coming right before reality exists is the potential for reality, where all truths, all symbols, all emotions, all whatever layer of reality that you can perceive or not, the potential for that exists concurrently or post currently, and so I think we have synchronicity in material reality. We often don't pick up on it, and it comes from all things being interconnected, but that doesn't negate the fact that a good number of things are also material. And for me, that connects to this kind of proposition that you're talking about, relative to the expansion into all of the things and recontraction into the one thing, where in the all of the things category there are all of the material things and all of the illusory things, not necessarily one or the other. Why should we choose one or the other? I guess that's where it clicked back together for me. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah. Well, I guess where it shows up to me is, or what leapt to mind in there was that we have this tendency to make separations where there aren't separations. And like I was listening to Bernardo Kastrup, who I think is an analytical, what did he call it? I thought I would remember. But basically, it's his picture of things is that there is no difference between the bird, the plover, and the meaning of a plover. It's just that the meaning of a plover, when it shows up at this dimension, it looks like a bird that's a plover.
Yeah, you're saying dimension and I'm saying plane, but it's the same thing.
Same idea that
Right.
they're
The
not really
symbol,
different things.
or that they both exist. That
Well,
they're
and I
different
think he's
facets of
saying
the
that they're
same.
actually inter somehow,
Yes,
which is,
they're interrelated. Yeah.
but here it isn't a relation of two separate things. It's actually like you can take a picture of a thing in 2D, or you can take a video walking around it. Sort of just different dimensions of a oneness.
Yeah.
And
That's where I come up with planes, but dimensions works too.
yeah, and so So in that sense, we are a development in both directions. In the development of a brain that can, can translate it can be is the counterpart of a higher meaning and grokking potential for the universe, which we've talked about before from a number of different angles. But so the other interesting element about this, just kind of related to the plover, was I heard a thing, and I think it was Jordan Peterson, who was talking about the yin-yang symbol. And he was talking about the S-shaped line in the middle and saying that what that S-shaped line represented was that on one side was chaos and on the other side was order, and our job is to sort of walk along that line, and sometimes we're pointed towards chaos and sometimes we're pointed towards order, but really we're balancing between the two. And when I first heard that, it sort of offended my sensibilities, because I've been thinking and associating with the yin-yang idea machine for so long and from so many different directions, and I'd never thought of yin as chaos per se, or as yang as order per se. But I've started to recogitate that.
If you replace order with form,
or logos,
and chaos with potential, then I think it adds up.
or disorganized matter, uncatalyzed matter, the unpolished mirror of the ultimate, of the real, for Ibn al-Arabi. Then it does sort of, I can certainly hear the argument. And then that idea of the path, well, that is, at first it struck me as kind of cheesy, but now when I think of it in terms of the plover, and the fact that the ultimate message to the plover and to that dance with chaos translates to be here now, because it's that changeability, and our movement with that changeability, that is that quality that the plover manifests: adaptability, resilience, persistence, and mindfulness of that ever-present change. When the potter is working on the wheel, they have to see what their hands just did to be able to do the next thing to end up where they want. So there's, again, a feedback loop with reality, or what's happening now with what my intent is. And there's another circle there. Maybe there's a part in coherence. What I'm doing now is a part related to the coherence of the vision of the finished pot that I'm trying to do. Or maybe I don't know what the pot's going to look like, and it's my feedback with my hands and the clay as I do it that creates the final piece. But at any point, mindfulness, or this type of consciousness, seems to be what's required to, and I'm sure there's people that are going to say, no, we just tape a banana to a wall and you're good. But I'm thinking maybe in a little more of this interactiveness in the process, maybe.
Yeah, I've heard some psychological interpretations of why we create chaos in our lives. Like I've heard, and this is a little pop psychology, so with a grain of salt. If we have a messy car or a messy desk, we're subconsciously trying to keep people away from us. We're trying to create, we're trying to expand our internal space into our external space and push those boundaries further out. Like it's chaos in here, so it's going to be chaos in the car too, etc.
And interesting.
After I heard that, on some level it resonates with me, and I've kept my car neat for the last few years. Not like it's still full of dog hair and all that stuff, but not full of like the receipt from the grocery store and the coffee cup and all that. So like I take that stuff out with me every day. And I have a different sense in the car than I used to. And when I'm terrible at keeping my desk neat, but when I do have a neat desk, I have a different sense also. And I think that's a different level of argument about chaos and order, because that's less about how the maybe meaning making is about the integration of those and walking that line. I always thought of that line, by the way, as the encroachment of each on the other, as opposed to the line representing us, kind of needing to walk the path between them.
The push and pull.
Yeah. It's like the tide.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, of course, it leaps to mind for me, Narcissus and Goldmund. By Hermann Hesse, which is, one is an artist and one is a scholar. One leads an ordered life and one is out there tearing it up. And there's the Dionysian and the Apollonian personalities was a popular dichotomy. I'll put in the show notes where that one comes from. And there's another one, Ahriman, and that I think Rudolf Steiner talks about. But there are definitely these different tendencies and different ways of making friends with order and chaos. I feel like, again, the shaman is someone that's on that line between order and chaos.
And that's so much about being in the present moment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've never called a plover in a ceremony.
But
there's something to think about there, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, I thought, it's interesting. And I don't remember where the Chronosynclastic Infundibulum washed up on the beach in the time that I was thinking about the plover, but I initially thought of them as separate topics. And then I started to query myself, are these two related and you're just not getting it? And I came to the conclusion that they are related in the fact that the way the plover came up on the beach, that relationship from the dream world to the world of conscious, trackable, rational reason, that was the effect of the infundibulum, that was funneling, that dance between things that just happen and the meaning that gets extracted from them, that's part of that funneling of the great cosmic funneling of all things towards meaning, towards the point of all meaning, towards the omega point, or the opening of the eye of Shiva, or any of that, where all meaning converges in one point. And we just have doing it little by little in little pieces. But the force of the infundibulum is with us. May the infundibulum be with you.
So that is my argument for Michael, basically, that the dream world and synchronicity and symbols and all of that stuff shoots up into the funnel along with the material world and the billiard balls bouncing into each other, and they interrelate, or they are two dimensions of a multi-dimensional reality that we don't fully perceive.
The Tao and the Da.
How is he going to refute that? Because I'm sure he's thought about this a lot more than I have.
Well, if you hit him with the Chronosynclastic Infundibulum right off, he'll be reeling.
So it goes.
And so then you'll win a good couple points before he's got his feet under him again. That would be my advice.
I think that's what Vonnegut would say.
Maybe. I don't know. And that would be the great value of asking him, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's why we try to get these folks that have really devoted their lives to asking very particular questions in very particular fields, which is something that I don't have. And maybe that's because they're more in the Goldmund and which was which? I think the artist was Goldmund, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a little more in that realm, and the scholars are more the Narcissus. And so, which is no implications of narcissism there. These are just the two names in the book, right? But the one was a scholastic, an academic, and the other was the artist. And so maybe there is that dichotomy. I hadn't thought of that before. But that is interesting. And it's in making that dialogue fruitful, which is kind of what we're doing here, because all the themes return.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tidy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. For bodies of water, for me, in dreams, there's kind of like a shorthand that I use for dream interpretation, and it's like stuff that I don't know what a symbol is, but this is going to get me down a path, and then maybe the insight follows. So, so water, I tend to associate with emotion. Like astrologically, water signs have more to do with intuition and emotion, and non-rational consciousness, right? Just like a car, you can shorthand as, or any vehicle, you can shorthand as vocation. And then, you might get more specific, or you might say, well, it's not vocation in this case. It means something else. But it's like how you're moving forward in the physical world.
Yep. And then a lot of these things reveal themselves once they're way in the rearview mirror.
Sure. Yeah.
Particularly, like I've had some significant water dreams that showed up at certain chapter changes. That
there's the whole thing about breathing in water, or being unable to breathe. Then there's being able to hold your breath for a long time. Then there's trying to breathe, and water gets in your lungs and it wakes you up. And then there's being able to breathe underwater. And there's like a whole progression that happens that relates, I think, generically to your ability to walk this line between order and chaos, or emotional plane, rational plane, or however you want to look at that.
Yeah. No, in my significant water dream, which happened when I was in the early process of becoming my own person, I was walking in the woods on a trail behind a bunch of significant people in my life that had been like, relatives and teachers and all. It's like, it was weird because what would all these people be doing here? Because that isn't where they showed, they showed up in all these different things, but I'm walking behind them somehow. And I'm like really thirsty, but I don't have any water. I can't get any water, but there's this little stream that's kind of going along near the path. And I would bend down and try to fill my hands with water so that I could drink. And every time I would do it, somebody walking ahead in the path ahead of me would step in such a way that the water would just disappear and soak into the weeds. And I went, damned enchanters, or something like that. And so this goes on a couple times, and my frustration builds until finally I jump off of the trail that we were all walking on. And I jump into the middle of the stream of water, which has gotten larger now, so that I'm straddling the deepest section, and I'm up to my mid-calves on both sides of it. No way anybody upstream here is going to be able to change the, and I dip my hands into it, and I finally get my hands into the water. And as soon as I touch the water, I'm not thirsty anymore. And then I lift my cupped hands up out of the water, and there's this artifact in my hands. And what it looked like was it looked like a hay hook. If you know what a hay hook is, it's a handle with a big hook on it that you grab a bale of hay with to muscle it around, except the handle wasn't at right angles to the hook. It was on the same plane as the hook. And the whole thing was tiny. and it looked like it had been in the water a long time. So it looked kind of also like the Blue Oyster Cult symbol, another rock and roll reference. And then I didn't, in the dream, and the question is, what is this? What does this mean? What's this about? This was somehow the point of all the jumping in the water and everything. And clearly it was old. And clearly I didn't know what it meant. And then somehow I had another dream reference to an old museum that had a bunch of these things or similar, like different variations of this thing on an old board, or it had them all side by side. But somehow I didn't come away with what it was. But, the whole thing could easily fit in my hands, my cupped hands, which a hay hook would not. But the shape, So anyway, looking back in what that chapter was in my life, I definitely jumped off the path. And I definitely went knee deep in stuff that was not on the path, that was not none of the people that were on that path would that have made any sense to at all. So
I think the Blue Oyster Cult connection is actually important.
Yeah, it's interesting.
The oyster, having pearls in it, pearls of wisdom. I mean, there's that's rich. And then the word cult also, because not necessarily with the negative connotation, but with the implications of in a way, I guess we're always in a cult, right? We're in the cult of the way we make meaning now, and so that doesn't have any negative
even if it's a cult of one. Yeah.
Lowercase c, right? It's just like we're short for culture, right? We are a culture. We associate meaning in a certain way. We associate belonging in a certain way. All the things that we talk about, right? And so Blue Oyster Cult actually means a lot to me as that symbol.
And that jumping into the water was kind of an on your feet or on your knees moment. Another rock and roll reference, Blue Oyster Cult. Right. So no, there was some interesting things there, and as I've mentioned before, my relationship with the dream world has been changing, and I'm having a little more direction. And so
lucidity,
a little more lucidity here and there, not every time, it's still infrequent, but way more frequent than any of my younger days. And so that's kind of interesting. And there is this whole topic, Carl Jung did a whole thing with guided meditations we might have talked about once. There was a book I also referenced called The Inner Guide Meditation, which tries to follow Jung's lead. And Freud and those guys, they used hypnosis for a lot of those same purposes, with the idea that there is meaning that can be mined out of that chaotic
and free association, even without hypnosis.
World and free association.
I mean, the way psychoanalysis works,
Rorschach.
Just say whatever comes to mind. And it's the analyst's job to kind of try to connect the dots. And and it's weird how well it works sometimes.
It can be, yeah. And it has to do with the essentially mystical relationship, mystical and
mysterious?
I get it. And mysterious, mystical, mystical and mysterious relationship between listening and speaking, particularly, in a live setting. Yeah, and meaning, and meaning wanting to manifest somehow, and us being just the meatware is just the meatware of the meaning. And again, then, we, in just one of the past few episodes, we referenced this idea that who we are in our particularity our contingent self, kind of amounts to our interpretation of life, the universe, and everything. And this sort
how
of
we live is our philosophy, not what we think. That's what you're saying.
And that ultimately that is in a process of evolution that will get ultimately sucked down by the synclastic infundibulum. That's what expanding awareness is being able to bridge to more meanings, more dimensions, more timelines, more human experiences, more others, something like that, to mix a lot of our metaphors.
Yeah. Well, that might be too tough of a spelling project for a title, but but I think we can incorporate elements of it. And cool. That was a good topic. I enjoyed it, and I like the connection to this Michael Wolff question, and I was meaning to come back to that order and disorder question too, about the pre-Socratic philosophers too. So, not surprisingly, a few dots were connected.
Yeah. And that's one of the fascinating things, I think, about the explication of this cognitive model, is that it's like a city map that you can get from anywhere to anywhere if you know the streets. And there's some very interesting traffic jams here and there, and bringing in some people to help us with traffic control is kind of an interesting thing here and there. People that have more refined version maps of certain parts of the town, with that comparison, and that's I think that's been really fruitful, and it's been fun to watch and be a part of.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, and I actually did notice some comments. I don't always get to go back because we have so many episodes that I don't always get to go back and see all the comments, but I did want to give a shout out to the folks that have dropped us some comments, and we really appreciate it. And yeah, please recommend us. And if you can drop a like, it does spread us out, because, there's so much other stuff out there on the interwebs and YouTube that if you, take a second and give us a like, it helps push us up against all the cat videos and stuff. And, so we appreciate it. And the Chronosynclastic Infundibulum will appreciate it, I think.
Yeah, it could always use more subscribers.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. Great to see you.
Yep. Good to see you too, sir. Ciao.